9 o'clock this morning. The only break I had was a lunch break for about half an hour, and I just came inside at 7:30.
Uh,
The last thing I did before I came in, I took some pictures of the flowers that beautify my garden.
and so where are you now? Your garden?
I am in Toronto.
Oh, you're in Toronto.
I am in Toronto.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, let me call on Curtis. Take a minute, tell us who you are, where you're from, what you're doing these days.
So, Curtis Archie. I could have pronounced it for you in Texan, but I didn't.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I want to hear it.
So I know I have to roll the R's. So Curtis Archie. So retired here in Trinidad. Used to be a geologist with the state company until we were laid off back in 2018. And I've been doing a lot of nothing, mostly flying my drone and taking photos with it.
Nice. It sounds like fun. Sounds like you're not doing
Curtis
nothing.
is our resident geologist in the house.
And in the background is one of my photos there.
Wow. Where is that? What is that?
A mud flow associated with a mud volcano.
Oh, interesting. And your drone captured that?
Yes, so I have a 3D model of it also.
Oh, very cool. Wow. So you're that guy that flies the drones.
Since we are under lockdown now, I can't fly it anymore.
Oh, yeah. There's some, yeah, that's probably a whole conversation one could have about the whole drone issue. So it's nice to meet you, Curtis.
Ian, will you go next? Unmute.
Hi. You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ian Mohan is my name. I'm in Trinidad as well, like my friend Govind. I'm a secondary school teacher, so I teach kids from 11 to 16. I'm also a dean at the school. And right now I'm locked down, can't leave the house until the morning.
Because of COVID?
Yeah, just a little background. There's a curfew in Trinidad at the moment.
Oh.
Yes, we are we have
because of the
overnight curfew because of COVID.
Oh, okay.
So we are all indoors.
Yeah, you can't let that nice weather. I imagine with that nice weather, you probably just want to get out and be with people and play cricket or drink or hang out, and they're trying to ward that off, I'm sure. Well,
no, I think life is more important than cricket and all of that.
yes, absolutely. I agree.
And
Yes,
so,
nice
Vicky,
to meet you.
one of my friends who I wanted to introduce you to is missing tonight. His name is Dave Gurahu. He is the one who I said shared the same birthday as you.
Oh.
But he is in California and he has a student who is defending a thesis tonight and he is the advisor. So he had to cancel tonight. So guys, that's why Dave is not here. But my little story is that Ian, Dave, and I lived in the same house when we went to the University of the West Indies. Yes.
Okay.
So we're housemates. Okay, let's go to Roger Ahmed.
Hi, Vicky. How are you doing?
Hello. Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I think when you joined, I was having internet problems, so I had to quickly run across to my son and get him to advise me how to tether my connection, and then I returned. So
yes,
us old people need some help from the
It's
youth.
a first language for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a second language for a lot of us.
Yeah. So I'm in Toronto, like the other Roger, and at Radford, and somebody who will introduce themselves shortly, Peter, who is also known as owner down in the corner there. So, and my background is business. For tonight's discussion, we're going to be discussing the book that Dennis had suggested, and this is
Right.
all part of a kind of a collaborative effort about trying this experimental hybrid book club. So, you know, I'm hoping that I can contribute and with pieces from the book and that sort of stuff. So,
Great.
yeah.
Wonderful. Nice to meet you. I do have one question. How did so many of you end up in Toronto? And why Toronto?
Well, when I think in Trinidad,
Yeah.
when you wanted to pursue higher education, if you weren't going to stay locally, the typical locations you head to would be London in the UK, Miami, New York, and Toronto.
Got it.
So that's at least my story. I came to Toronto because
Yeah.
I had 4 sisters that preceded me. So
Oh.
this Toronto is going to be where I was going to pursue higher education.
Sure.
And but the other guys, some are perhaps late comers to Toronto and that sort of stuff. They have different stories.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
Interesting.
Vicky, let me pitch in that Canada and Trinidad were parts of the British Commonwealth.
Right.
So it was easier to get a visa to go to England or to Canada than to come to the US for a long
Sure.
time. Roger,
Right.
you wanted to add?
Yeah, that makes
No,
sense.
well, in our case, Radford has been up here. Well, both he and my sister, who is now deceased, came up here in the 60s,
Okay.
which is a hell of a long time, right? And
Well, I don't know about you, but it seems like yesterday.
okay, but yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, we've been coming back and forth, you know,
Yeah.
to up here. So it was sort of a
Right.
natural,
Okay.
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Makes
Okay.
sense.
And so for the guys who joined after we got started, Vicky is a guest of mine today. She and I started a book club in Virginia in 2004. And when I called her on her birthday, which was the 28th of April, same as Dave Guru, I mentioned that we were having this book club session and invited her, and she decided to join. So,
But he said
now-
I was very brave to come hang out with you guys. So I don't know what he meant by that, but
And so let me go to Lawrence and then
Yeah.
Peter and then Richard Poon King. Would you
Lawrence had to step away for a phone call, so he said that
Oh.
on the chat.
So let's take
Oh,
a minute and just tell Vicky a little bit about yourself. Just introduce yourself. Richard Poon King, as you're off mic, as why don't you go first and then Peter Pan will go second.
All right, well, I'm still in Trinidad. Class with all of these guys. I'm a doctor. I spent 5 years in New York, so I have some sort of, how should I say, overlapping experience with a lot of the guys who find themselves now in what we call the diaspora. And I think that probably is why I have found it quite easy to understand shared experiences, having lived in the States for 5 years.
sure.
And when I hooked up, this was 15, 16 years ago, as I commented to some of them, it was just like we'd been on a long summer vacation and we just came back and it was just right back where we started. So that's my
Wow.
story.
It's really amazing that you're all together and that you, after all these years, you've stayed connected or you reconnected, and that's fantastic. Yeah. It's
Amazing
great.
is called Dennison. He's the glue.
I think if you looked up Dennison and all kinds of lights, amazing would fit. I would
Yeah.
agree. He is a unifier,
Yeah.
no doubt.
Hey, Vicky, now I met most of these guys 50 years ago,
Wow.
but some of them had already known each other for 5 or 6 years before that.
Oh, wow.
actually, we went to primary school
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Mhm.
Man, that's amazing. I just reconnected with a friend from 40 years ago, and I thought that was pretty amazing because we hadn't talked and we just picked right up. So I can understand that when you reconnect, you go to that place that the thing that brought us together wasn't about our careers or, it's more heart level and some
Yes.
shared experiences. Nice.
Peter K.
Hi, Vicky.
Hello.
I have to say you've raised the attractiveness level of our meeting.
Oh, please. I don't know about that. I'm looking around the room thinking that's not true.
Come on, look at these guys.
So it was the cactus that did it.
I thought the cactus is a good selling point.
In any event, about me, I'm in Canada too. I'm in Hamilton, just
Okay.
outside Toronto.
Okay.
I'm also in teaching. A lot of these guys seem to be educators. I teach high school math, and I've been here for almost 30 years.
Nice.
And I have to echo Mother's remarks regarding Dennis. Dennis is the glue that kept us together, that kept us growing.
Yeah.
So kudos to the man from Faizabad. And it's nice having you. Like I said, it would have been nice to get a warning so I could comb my hair and stuff, but all right.
And Peter, you don't know who Mother is, okay?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Roger.
Vicky, that's my nickname. Don't ask, okay?
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know who that is, but I'm just gonna smile and go with it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's nice meeting you.
Hey, Govind, is that in Guyana? That's those sluice gates behind you?
Where is that?
Ask again, Roger.
Govind?
don't think that he-
Govind, that picture behind you, is that in Guyana?
Yeah, that's in Guyana.
Okay.
In the sugarcane fields, they have these extensive square miles of sluice gates.
Okay.
What is that called again?
It's a sluice
Sluice?
gate that regulate the water
In the
Oh,
rivers.
in the rivers.
Yeah.
wow, interesting.
Because Guyana is below sea level, you see.
Yeah.
So they have these gates on the coast primarily. And when it's high tide, they shut the gate so the water doesn't flow inland. And when it's low tide in the sea, they raise the gates so that the water that builds up in the rivers flow out
flow.
into the sea.
Oh,
You see?
interesting. I've never, of course,
Yeah,
heard of that. but
it's a Dutch innovation, I guess,
Yeah,
with the seawall and so on.
yeah,
They
very nice.
probably have 200 or 300 miles of seawall,
Mhm.
Hmm,
concrete seawall.
Yeah, because the land is below sea level
right, makes
from
sense.
the coast. So
Right. Yeah. I think that's similar to the only thing I can think of comparable in this country is probably Louisiana. I
Yeah.
think
Right.
parts of that are probably below sea level
Yeah.
Right.
as well.
Okay, so lady and gentlemen, I am going to share my screen, and
Okay.
Roger Ahmad, I'll try to call you that name tonight as far as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
I know it won't last. So, yeah, go ahead.
okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can get out of this view. Click, 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 click. Okay, this is not cooperating, so just hang on. I doubt that you all are seeing what's not cooperating here for.
Yeah.
No. It won't go to slideshow view.
Yeah, so
you can click on view and just choose presentation mode.
yeah, that's what I've been trying to do there.
There we go.
There
There,
you go.
you got it.
There you go.
Okay, so let's do this, right? Tonight, because most of the people here didn't read the book,
What? Okay. It's that kind of book club.
Yeah.
You don't actually read the book and then what, you drink?
um, I've asked Roger Ahmad to lead us through what was in the book, and then we will discuss questions about the book. And if you
Okay.
didn't read the book, you can just present your point of view. That sounds good?
But we may not pay any attention to it if you didn't read the book.
I read Cliff Notes.
Right.
So,
Thank
so,
you, Vicky. Thank you.
so,
Good.
so Dennison,
Yes.
I'm wondering if you don't mind, maybe if I could share my screen, that way I can walk through the slides,
Oh,
you know,
great.
and that sort of stuff. Is that okay?
Oh man, I would prefer that. I was just trying to help you out.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Okay. Let me see. Share.
And then you could give it back when we get to the Q&A, right?
Well, I'll see. I might not give it back to you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So there, you should be seeing that. And then we go to the slideshow, right?
Right.
Okay. So then, one thing I'll try, it's hard to do, let me see. When I'm sharing my screen, I can't see if people, you know, show a hand or something like that. So I'm gonna have to rely on you, Dennis, to interrupt me. And I will try to, you know, take a breath in between so that you have the opportunity for people to ask questions, because I think, I hope you agree, Dennis, but we want discussion. You know, this is not, it's in a PowerPoint, but it's not a presentation. It's about discussion and ask questions.
Right.
And the people who have read the book and stuff can contribute, and other people can provide their thoughts as well. Is that okay?
So, Roger,
Yeah.
every time that you want to break, just hit the stop share button and let us come together where we could see everybody, and we will talk, and then
Okay.
you share again, right?
All right. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Let's try this now.
Yeah.
All right. So as most of you remember, the book that was chosen is A Paradise Built in Hell. So what we thought we would do, knowing that, as Vicky said, it's that type of book club. Few of us have read the book, and that's fair enough, because people you know, people lead busy lives.
Yeah. Right.
So what I'm going to do is recap some of the main components from the book. With that, you know, we will bring everybody up to speed a bit, you know, not as much areas that will be worth further discussing. So we'll proceed.
Sounds good.
Right. And so this is the book, A Paradise Built in Hell, and the author, Rebecca Solnit. And she has a secondary title, The Extraordinary Communities That Arise in Disaster. And so she covers several disasters in the book. The main ones that she covered was the first one was the San Francisco earthquake that took place in 1906. And you'll see I have a little asterisk there, because even though she covered 5 or 6 major disasters, I only recapped 3 of them, because, you know, we don't have all night, right?
Right.
So the other one was a Halifax explosion in 1917. This one we won't touch on, but just to let you know, this one was in World War I time, and in Halifax, in the main harbor, there's a Narrows area, and in that area at the time, they were amassing ships to head across and take supplies and ammunition over to England, where the war was taking place, or Europe, right? At the time, there was one ship that was loaded to bear with ammunition, and another ship that was passing it, and there was some sort of you know, somebody wasn't in the right place, and they collided. The ships caught fire, especially the ammunition ship, and eventually it blew up, and it leveled the entire city of Halifax. Just in December, no less, in the winter. It was a horrible situation, but yet in that there were moments of utopia, as we'll discuss. Another on Mexico City in 1985. This will happen in our lifetime. And I don't know how much people remember of this, but this was a huge earthquake in Mexico City, and all the the poor construction and that sort of stuff came tumbling down, killing and crushing people and that sort of stuff, right?
Mhm.
New York City, 9/11,
Yeah.
all probably seared heavily into our brains. We'll discuss that one. And New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, which is, she finished off the book with this, and this was quite powerful. Both all of these are quite powerful, but because to me personally, some of these things happen in my lifetime, and I remember it happening, looking at it on TV and all that. Some of the stuff that she talks about in the book is quite eye-opening. So let's talk about the San Francisco earthquake. That happened at 5:12 a.m. Wednesday, April 18, 1906. It lasted for about 1 minute at a magnitude of 7.9, and the epicenter was only 2 miles west of San Francisco in the Bay, I guess, right? And it affected essentially a 5 square mile area in San Francisco. What was interesting is that in Oakland, across the Bay, they were not affected.
Right.
So San Francisco was reduced to rubble by the earthquake, but Oakland was still operating. Surprisingly, they had gas mains to the houses, and these broken gas mains led to numerous fires. In the end, 28,000 structures were destroyed, and half of the city's population of 400,000 became homeless.
Wow.
So a couple 100,000 people homeless as a result, and 3,000 people died. So for each one of these disasters, I'm going to, from the author's, from what she has there, the book, I'm going to point out what she points out as the good and the bad. So the good thing that the people moved to parks, to Union Square, I think, but then they had to evacuate Union Square in San Francisco because of fires. Then they all ended up, or a lot of people ended up in the Golden Gate Park. And an example of where people's altruistic nature came through. She talked about this one lady, Anna, and by the third day, although they had, they were essentially homeless, she had stitched together blankets, carpets, sheets, and she sheltered 22 people, including 13 children. And people started dragging stoves out of the houses because they couldn't go into the houses because of the gas, the danger from the gas, right? And so she actually bought some eating utensils from Oakland several days later. And then eventually she's feeding 200 to 300 people a day. Money had no relevance. Currency had no relevance. So this was all people donating stuff. And these are people donating their time to help others. She was a victim. She was not a victim, but a victim. And this was repeated many times over. You have these, they named, these people had a sense of humor too. In the middle of this disaster, they named their little tent soup kitchen the Palace Hotel, which ended up being the Mitzvah Cafe. And there were others called the Oyster Loaf, the Chat Noir, the House of Mirth. And this is all in a disaster, right? People in the, just trying to move my screen here. Okay, there. People, so what happened? You had people who slaughterhouses where meat was going to go bad because they couldn't keep it cold. So what they did is they dragged the meat out and let the people take the meat. They had dairymen who would milk gallons of milk, not gallons, but 10-gallon barrels of milk. They would drop those off at these kitchens, these makeshift kitchens. So that's how they got supplies to feed so many people who were in need. They even had music and singing to drown out the noise of explosions. And you ask why explosions? Well, they were explosions because, or there were couples murmuring in the dark, if you get my drift, right? Also, like I said before, money was irrelevant, but the explosions I'll get to, I guess, on another slide. Food was given out. There were no questions asked about whether you're taking too much or you're taking more than your share or you didn't get enough. People were given whatever they needed. There was no kind of mistrust. There was complete solidarity and empathy with regards to their fellow survivors. So these are just some of the pictures you can see on the left there. You can see that the people have dragged the stove out to the street and they set up a tent. And on the right-hand side too, you can see, I don't know if you guys can make out, it's kind of small, but that's those tents on the right, it says something lunchroom. So this is what people would do it in the middle of a disaster. I'll offer a moment here. Any questions or any comments?
Yeah, I didn't understand the couples murmuring in the park thing.
Oh, well, I thought of all people you might have.
I know all people meet.
No,
Remember that he's a
quite seriously,
mathematician,
Mother,
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
yeah, Mother, stop sharing your screen so we could see Peter Khan face when he asking these questions. Yeah. So Peter.
Now I'm seeing your face.
Yeah. Peter, it had a lot of children around. So they engaged them in singing so they wouldn't hear what other adults were doing.
I just thought that was a very quaint way to put it. Couples murmuring in the park. Sound almost poetic.
Well, you know that Mother is a poet.
Let's talk a little bit about it. Let's talk about a little bit about the language of this book that I have not yet read. A lot of historical pieces, I imagine this is a more contemporary piece, but they use a lot of flowery language to disguise what was going on. Does that happen a lot in this novel?
Okay, so
when you say they use flowery language,
there's the document.
Yeah, I think that there are 3 or 4 of us who read the book, so I'll call on those who read the book to respond, right? And so, Vicky, if you want to go first, go right ahead, then I will go after.
I would say no. I don't think she used flowery language. I think she anchored it to the real, what was actually happening, and like she tried. I felt as a researcher, she stayed with the facts of what was reported in the news, what was written. There were a lot of publications that came out of the time. And so it was, sticking more, I felt, pretty closely to what was written rather than over interpreting it or maybe even under interpreting. But I didn't find the language flowery, is that a word?
Yeah, like the flowers behind me.
But one of the things I was going to say before on your list of good is the division between the classes for a while sort of dissolved. So, because the banks were closed, there was nobody with money, and homes were ruined, and it seemed like there was, for a moment, a time where someone on the street, you wouldn't know if they had money or not. They might have been homeless as well. So I thought that was a powerful, good effect of it. Not a staying effect, but a good effect of the time.
Hey, Orson, you wanted to make some input?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I'm just listening.
Okay. So, Roger, I think that she tried to be as objective as she could be. I don't think that the language was flowery, but she used a lot of sophisticated language and a lot of imagery. She is a powerful writer, so the vocabulary is vast. And so at the end of the day, I am figuring that to get to know the author and the context out of which she came, the book covers say things like she is one of the most revered authors of the last 25 years, that she is right now enjoying, her years as a very acclaimed author on the West Coast of the United States. She writes from a strong feminist perspective. And if you all had read the article that we mentioned in one of our chats on mansplaining, right? She is the person who coined that term, right? That
Oh,
mansplaining.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
and so I intend to send out a link to the group with that mansplaining article because it's only about 2 pages long. And so I will send that out within the next week. So back to Roger Ahmed, do you want to respond to Roger DePisa's?
I would say that, you know, she's gone and she's gotten some behind the scenes stories that don't normally make the publications or are not prominent in the publications. So she's kind of dug out that. The other part is, remember, I just presented to you the good. So the next page will be the bad. And, you know, she will reference things that were done that were actually counterproductive, right? So I guess I'll proceed. And the other thing too is, you know, I'll try to pick up the pace because I know I have quite a few slides. So I don't want us to...
Yeah, and just one more thing. We have a Q&A session to follow Roger's recap. And there we will present our point of view, what we liked, what we didn't like, what we agreed with, what we disagreed with, right? So,
okay.
Yeah.
Roger.
Yeah. All right, so I'll share my screen again. I just noticed Lawrence came back. I don't know, did you want Lawrence an opportunity to
Sure.
introduce yourself?
Right. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hi Vicky.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I'm Lawrence. I'm also a teacher.
And a doctor.
Shocking. And a doctor too. Shocking.
I'm the doctor. Thank you Roger, for reminding me.
Vicky, Lawrence is the mayor of his town.
Yeah,
What?
I teach my kids very well. I taught them very well, I believe.
Nice. And are you in Trinidad?
No, I'm in the Toronto area as well.
Oh, you're in Toronto. Excuse
Yeah.
me. Yeah. Very nice.
I am
And
I
you're
am
the-
retired. I still owe my friend here, Peter Khan, a call to explain that something happened a couple of weeks ago and he asked me about that. Yes, so I am officially retired from my day job.
Are
which
you
was
still
in,
the mayor?
in telecommunications. No. No.
He gave that up.
I gave that up. Well, there was some little issues with Meghan and so on and Harry, so I yeah. So
Nice.
I'm officially retired, but I have a side hustle that I'm focusing on these days and doing online marketing, digital marketing basically.
Nice.
And other than that, yeah, I'm enjoying the life.
The online the hustle you're doing is Melinda Gates, I hear.
Listen, I'm trying. I just want to get a divorce.
Good luck, boy.
Marry and divorce.
All right, I will. That's
Funny.
Lawrence for you, also known
Nice
as
to
Dose.
meet you.
Anyways.
Known as Dose?
Yes, Dose.
Yeah.
The middle name.
Okay,
yeah.
now you have to tell me what Dose, why, I know two, but why two? Why Dose? Why
Oh.
not Uno?
It's just
But
short.
one was not enough, you know.
Well, my surname is Dos Santos, so the Dose is just a short form
Oh.
of everything, right? Yeah.
Dose, I got it,
Right.
got it. Okay,
All right. Well, we head
Nice.
back to the presentation now.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Doctor.
okay.
Okay. All right. So those are the pictures of San Francisco. Let's see what's happening. Oops. Yeah. So the bad. So in the midst of all of these citizens helping themselves, all this altruistic behavior and looking after each other, there were other groups that felt ill at ease with this situation.
Mhm.
And those included the armed forces. The armed forces, they saw chaos and the need to impose order. You know, can't have all these people just doing all these things that they want to do, you know. the wealthy who feared uprising of the poor, the governors who knew that they were not in control, and they didn't like that either. They had to take back control, right? Outsiders looking from a distance, they imagined it a lot worse than it actually was. The only scared people were, like I said, the ones at a distance. In particular, there was a General Frederick Funston, and he was at the Presidio Army base, which is Northern California, and he was his second in charge at the time. The other his boss was away at the time, but he was a hothead. He served power and privilege without question. So that was where he was coming from, and he needed, in his mind, to save San Francisco from the people, the same people who are just recently turned into, refugees, essential, and homeless people. And he saw them as a mob to be repressed. San Francisco was taken over by his hostile army. Much that had survived the earthquake was burnt down. And this is where I mentioned the dynamite and stuff. What the army decided, they didn't know exactly what they were doing, but they thought, oh, well, listen, we can stop these fires from the gas mains that were broken by blowing up buildings and creating fire breaks with gunpowder and dynamite. The only problem with that thing is that, especially the gunpowder, was an igniter. So it ignited everything around it, which created a bigger fire. But they were experimenting, and nobody could stop them. This is what they were doing, and they prevented firefighting by volunteers. These volunteers and citizens were more effective with buckets of water, bucket brigades, in combating the fires, but they were prevented by the army because the army was in control. It's a control thing, right? The mayor, Eugene Schmitz, basically, he was part of fear-driven overreaction. And this is where the author introduces us to the term elite panic. And this mayor, this was what he had made posters up and had posted all over the city. He said, the federal troops, the members of the regular police force, and all specialized police officers have been authorized by me to kill any and all persons found engaged in looting or in the commission of any other crime. So this was really over the top. So essentially, this was death penalty for theft, right? They had deployed 17,000 troops in the city, but the mobs and the riots were totally figments of their imagination, of the authorities' imagination. In fact, what they saw as looting, people were actually doing what the author referred to as ethical pillaging. And this is things like taking mattresses from hotels that were, damaged by the earthquake and taking them to the hospital so that they could deal with the injured, the wounded and the injured. The drugstore windows were broken, and even the Salvation Army was doing it to get medicine and supplies to help with the injured. There was situations where in the book it talks about a man. There was a man that was bending down and picking at the rubble. So a soldier fired a warning shot to chase him away, right? So the man got up and he was running away, and then all of a sudden another shot rang out, and the man crumpled to he collapsed because he was shot again. In the end, what it turned out is that the rubble that he was picking at, he was trying to free a person who was trapped in the rubble. But no, they saw looting, they saw theft, and that was punishable by death. There's stories about 20 men at the wharf that were executed for not helping fight the fires, right? There were stories that these bodies, whoever was shot, was thrown into the fires. Now, you're not going to find documentation about this. This is, I guess, passed down through hearsay over time, right? And then lastly, after the fires were done, the mayor appointed a committee, which seems natural, to rebuild the city. But essentially, that committee made up of rich and connected people attempted a real estate grab because they wanted where Chinatown was located. Chinatown was located in a high value area, and they wanted to relocate China somewhere to the south of San Francisco. Fortunately, it was unsuccessful because I guess one or some other businessmen pointed out about the economic benefits that Chinatown brought. And then also, I think I read that the government of China kind of objected as well. So here we are in the middle of all this destruction, and there's a group of people who want to take advantage of this at the expense of the everyday person. The scenes of on the left of the burning of San Francisco burning, notice the soldier with the big rifle in the front. And this was the aftermath of, there was nothing left. It was big chunks of San Francisco. These photos were not in the book. These are what I researched on the internet and I pulled, and I thought they were relevant to what we were talking about. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and an opportunity for further discussion or questions.
One question I have, what was the racial composition of this 5 square mile area in terms of blacks and whites? And did she mention anything concerning different treatments, et cetera, in the novel?
She didn't mention that so much in San Francisco. In looking through the internet, I did see photos of a black community watching on while the fires raged. And, they were all, back then everybody was well dressed, It was, they were just looking on. I don't know if she mentioned any particular point where some black person was killed unnecessarily. Maybe some of the other readers might remember that about San Francisco. Okay. No, the one thought I had about that was that we talked today about how racial injustice and trying to keep down the black vote and all that sort of stuff. In San Francisco at the time, because she didn't mention a lot about racial injustice, it really was a class thing. It was the rich, the elite, trying to keep the poor down. The poor in that time was white mostly, right? Not the big black populations, and the Orientals, the Chinese. So it it begs the question in today's how much is pure racism, how much is pure greed or elitism? What is the mix today, right?
Yeah, and I think that she tried to avoid the color issue and keep it focused on economics. Also, the place where the explosions were taking place were highly populated. So it was poor places, as well as the suburbs around them where the rich people lived. So mansions were also devastated, right? Or blown up. So you had a mix.
Roger, could you remind me again of the time frame, please?
1906.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I know that just before Radford was born.
Yeah. So, one of the things that is interesting to note is that there's approximately 100 years between this catastrophe and Katrina that Mother will come on to in a little while.
Yeah. How much things are different but stay the same. All right. Yeah.
I wonder if that's true about every catastrophe where the rich try to get richer at the expense, using the catastrophe as a cover.
Well, let him do the 4 or 5 that he is recapping, and we will talk about the consistent patterns, trends. Mother, why don't you keep on going?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. There's San Francisco, the end of San Francisco. Let's talk about New York City, 9/11. Somewhere between 8:46 a.m. and 10:28 a.m., Tuesday, September the 11th, 2001. We all know the stories. Passenger aircraft were flown into the World Trade Center, Twin Towers, and the Pentagon. Another one was targeting the Capitol, but was brought down by passengers and crashed in Pennsylvania. some of these numbers, I see different numbers on the internet when I look, but it's around this number, plus or minus, you know,
Yeah.
20, 30. So 2,750 people were killed in New York, including over 400 firefighters and police. 184 people were killed at the Pentagon. 40 were killed in that plane crash in Pennsylvania. The good stuff. The towers had thousands of people, and these thousands of people, 25,000 of them approximately, aided each other in an orderly evacuation of the towers. It wasn't mass hysteria, wasn't mass panic, wasn't running over each other. People in the towers initiated rescue of others before firefighters and police. I mean, just logistically, they're there. They have to rescue, not they have to, but they are able to rescue people who have just been impacted by the disaster, much sooner than the firefighters and police. There was no panic, like I said before, no running, no trampling. There, you know, examples. The author uses many examples, and we can't recap all of them here. So I'm just picking and choosing different ones. There was a paraplegic accountant that was carried down the stairs. I forget how many stairs, by 10 of his co-workers, and they took relays. And in fact, he had a chair that was created specifically for this because of the previous attack on the towers, the one that was a truck carrying explosive stuff in the parking garage. So there was a little bit of preparedness there in that case, but it took 10 of his co-workers going on relays to bring this man down, you know, tens of floors. On those same stairs, although people were trying to get out and it was a panicky situation, if there were injured people that people were trying to get down, people would move over and allow the injured people to get through. The hospitals prepped for this huge influx of wounded, but in the end, it wasn't really needed. It's either you lived or you died when it came to 9/11. The citizens aided the wounded. They helped the firefighters. They directed traffic to emergency vehicles to get through to the towers. Small businesses around the area, when the towers collapsed and all of the dust and the fumes and everything was overwhelming people. They pulled people into their shops for better breathable air. And a bunch of people, only way to get out of that area of Manhattan was by boat. And so there was an armada of volunteers, of people with boats, etc., people who actually broke into boats to come and help evacuate over 300,000 people. 1 million people overall evacuated themselves from that lower part of Manhattan, which is, you know, maybe they walked over the bridge. I forget the name of the bridge, but they evacuated themselves. It wasn't the authorities. It was the people themselves. At the same time that these people were leaving, tens of thousands of other people converged on the site. That not only the firemen and the policemen, but people like iron workers, people of all backgrounds who were heading over to see what they could do to help. Skilled professionals, from medics to iron workers, like I said. I'll stop the share there for any questions.
We saw the best of Rudy Giuliani then.
Oh, you'll come to your boy. We'll see if that's how that stacks up. So okay, so it doesn't sound like we have many questions at this point. I'll continue on to the bad. Oh, there was another section of the good. So there was, as you would imagine, as you would remember, there was some anti-Muslim sentiment. It seemed to be coming from a loud minority. And as a result, people in one example, an Arab support center, were concerned for women and kids, for Muslim women and kids, and the threats that were being yelled and shouted at them. So they went onto the internet and asked for escort volunteers, and they were overwhelmed by over 1,200 volunteers. And I don't recall seeing it specifically said, but I have to believe this came from a wide cross section of the population, not just Arab or Muslim people, that type of thing. This was by people of all from all walks of life and all backgrounds. Pier 59, there was a warehouse there, and it ended up starting off small. One guy talks about how he went to help, he didn't know what he could do. Somebody told him stand behind a table and hand out donuts. And this was a very organic thing, and it was a very bottom-up process of volunteering and helping. And so then he says, 3 days later, he was in charge of 200 volunteers. And, you know, there was no red tape. There was no kind of organizational chart to follow. This was just happening very organically. As things needed to get done, they were getting done. They eventually created in Pier 59 a bit of a mini mall for the rescue workers on their breaks. And at any given time, any given 10 minutes periods, hundreds of people or 100 people were donating stuff. And the volunteers who manned this this warehouse or this mini mall, a lot of them were actually turned away by the city sites, the official help sites that were helping people and that sort of stuff, right? So in what they would do is that people would bring in respirators, goggles, medicine, clothes, shovels, etc. And they said about every 20 minutes, a police boat would come in and they would form a humid bucket brigade of 200 or 300 people, and they would fill that boat with everything that they could, and they would ship it off and rinse and repeat 20 minutes later. And like I said, they were just able to do. There was no red tape, no structure, it was just people helping each other. And this is after the fact. Despite the trauma done to New York City, apparently some of the biggest protests about going to war to avenge this attack came from those people in New York City. Here are some of the pictures. On the top left-hand side, you can see that there's a fireman going, you know, there's a good possibility that he went to his death. And that's the stairwell of one of the towers, people going down. You can see how obviously they're perspiring and stuff, must have been hot like hell in there, especially with fires and all that. On the right-hand side, I guess people exiting, covered in dust. And then down in the bottom, these may not have been the people in the tower alone. These might have been the people who were down on the grounds. And you know, maybe somebody has more information that they can clarify. But I'll any questions there? Do I need to stop sharing?
Yeah, just one observation.
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't talk about the international outreach to the US, which in truth and in fact was tremendous, because in NATO you had for the first time that thing was invoked. Secondly, the Canadians helped tremendously with regards to all of those planes that were caught up and couldn't land in the US, and people were taken into other people's homes and so on. So it's interesting, I didn't see any of that, international response with it.
Yeah,
did she mention anything about that?
No, I don't think she mentioned the Canadian aspect, and I would have been aware of it. But her focus was the towers and the people in the towers and how they helped each other, and the people in the immediate vicinity of the towers, how they helped others. Her focus was specifically on that. I don't know if anybody recalled any other references to international aid.
No, and let us connect it back to the question that Peter Khan was raising, right? Are there consistent patterns and trends? She gave a number of catastrophes and looked at what was consistent among those and didn't go to the international kind of, right? That wasn't part of what she wanted to write about.
Yeah. so in this, she's trying to connect that in this disaster, people are altruistic, helping each other, sometimes sacrificing themselves to help their fellow man, strangers, people from different religions, races, everything, helping each other. And later on, she will mention that there was one story she said about a Pakistani immigrant, likely Muslim, fleeing the dust cloud, and I think whether he fell or whatever, and then I'm not sure how to say it exactly, but a Hasidic Jewish man with, he came by and he helped him, and they had a brief exchange. Come, brother, let us get out of here, right? So these were the best of people in this disaster, right?
Yeah, and so, my take is that she is saying that disaster could bring out the best in people and the worst in people. And what brings out the worst in people is what you fear the most, right? So more on that in a little bit. Vicky, anything to add so we get a different voice?
Well, I'm unmuting here so I can have a voice. I think where you were going, Dennison, is I think the threads that are going to be across all these stories is where we see the best of humanity and the worst of humanity, and it's a fear-based sort of thing. So that we see that it goes from one high to the lows. But yeah, I think when we get further along and we've gone through all of the stories, I can say more.
Okay.
Yeah, Roger, could you finish your summary in about 15 or 20 minutes? So we have at least half an hour to chat.
Yeah. Okay. We'll push through. Okay. Okay. So, some more images of 9/11. This is all the people on the left-hand side that were trying to get on boats, and then these were the many boats that were taking people away, and I don't know. I guess would they have been taking them to New Jersey or something? So the bad side of 9/11, U.S. media, they wanted to present this like a disaster movie, like Towering Inferno. You remember that from our youth? They wanted to present, or it felt like they wanted to present masculine heroes. That these heroes were exceptional. They were professional. They were men of action, and most importantly, they were men. She didn't mention this, but I feel like the media would have wanted to present them as white men. So but that's not the author's words. That's my perspective.
Yep.
She said lost in this epic version that the media presented was the richness of the ordinary people's actions. They effectively rescued themselves. These people who did this, they were unathletic gay men. And this list here is just she's gone back to examples she put in the book. So she's referring to these examples. It's not that this is a global list. But she says it was unathletic gay men, it was older women execs, school principals, Hasidic Jews, gangs of accountants. Those are the people who carry the guy down in all the floors. Young men, homeless people, basically everyone were the heroes, the everyday people. The firefighters, they too were heroes. Of course, they were lionized. But however, they had inadequate equipment. They had incoherent instructions. She said that if there was proper, if anybody bothered to keep a record of which floors were searched, they would have needed half of the firefighters that went up, right? And obviously, a lot of them died. They were brave. They were selfless, and they did help in the evacuation. These firefighters were victims of terrorism, but they also were victims of the system, which was uncoordinated, unprepared, and ill-equipped. The bad. Well, here's Rudolph William Louis Louis Giuliani. He was a media hero. He was striding fearlessly through the streets of New York. He was dusted with a cloud of dust. He was speaking boldly and decisively, attending endless funerals. It seemed to be that he had a moment of transcendence with this, where he became this brave, empathetic, inexhaustible, and omnipresent figure. However, the author says that, listen, the old Giuliani, he came back. He was spiteful, he was self-serving, and he was scandal-ridden. This was before. And then he was doing things afterwards to basically about advancing his career. He suppressed and ignored the inconvenient facts and lauded his own preparedness. However, one of the things what he was responsible for was establishing an emergency operations center. And Rudy decided that, the best place to put this operations center, this is before the attack, is in the 7 World Trade Center, right? Where his staff were telling him, listen, you can't put that because that's the target. That's the likely target. They were using the term ground zero before the 9/11 attacks. And they were telling him, no, you can't, you shouldn't put it there. He said, screw that, we're putting it there. Even though across the Brooklyn Bridge, there was a city site already that they had that was secure and technologically advanced. Turns out that afterwards, the site that he leased at 7 World Trade Center, they were a future major campaign donor to Rudy Giuliani. It was one of the dumbest decisions. However, from that decision, he was this suit-covered nomad warrior legend. From his dumb decision, he would not have come across like that if it was across the river, because he would have been operating from a boardroom, antiseptic boardroom, something addressing the people. So here's his dumb decision making him into a hero. That the 7 World Trade Center site, obviously it was right next door to where the towers came down. It was evacuated, and because of that evacuation, they couldn't coordinate the response properly. If they were across the river, they would have been able to likely do a better job. So here's Rudy with his mask on the top left hand side. Here's a fireman. I don't know if you can see closely, but tears are streaming out of his eyes. Obviously distraught, as so many people were. And there he is, your Person of the Year on December 31st, 2001.
One quick observation, Roger. You can hold down the control button and scroll with the mouse to enlarge the picture on the screen.
Oh, okay. Hold on. You want me to? I'll do that. Let's try that. So hold down the control button.
Yep.
Okay. Oops. Sorry.
And scroll with the mouse.
Uh-oh.
Scroll up or scroll down.
Okay, I'm messing that up, Roger. Sorry about that. I think we leave well enough alone.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, let me just fast forward. Okay, so there we are. I'll stop sharing the screen for any comments. Stop sharing.
Yeah, something I always teach my students in terms of information technology, which is, you don't ever put your backup sites in the same place where the disaster could happen. And that is a lesson learned out of both 9/11 and Katrina, okay, in terms of the information technology aspect of things. Okay.
Yes.
So I just want to make that observation.
From the first one on San Francisco, he talked about trying to get rid of the Chinese from Chinatown. Right now in Miami, Little Haiti, which is a very impoverished Black area, it is also the highest one above sea level in Miami. And that is the most sought after land. They want to push out the Haitians, immigrants there, so that they can build these fancy buildings, because it is the highest ground right now. And it's all on YouTube, you can read about it. see it is. And they're doing it so smart, you
Yeah.
know, ease by
Yeah.
ease, pushing out the local people there.
Yeah, and so is there any parallels between that and the Syrians trying to buy out Laventil?
Well, so they say in Trinidad, I'm to see it yet.
Yeah.
Well, the pattern repeats itself many times over in history and is repeating itself as we speak in many parts of the world, right?
It's how our country was founded, is land grabbing.
Yeah.
And moving people out of their homelands. I mean, it's the origins. It's, you know, is it any surprise that we continue when it's the foundation of our country? Sad, but true.
Yes. Yeah.
I just have one more observation, really, about the whole 9/11 thing that just struck me. Perhaps in and I don't know if this is a human sort of response, but in their, I guess, eagerness to help, okay, people rushed into a very dangerous situation, a situation that they didn't properly, you know, assess the risks. So you end up with a whole heap of people dying unnecessarily, because they had no idea what was in front of them.
Yeah, and so that was an emotional decision made, not a cognitive decision made, right? So they did not have facts that they could think through and assess the situation, and they wanted to be responsive in an urgent kind of manner. So,
Yeah, so-
you know, I think that happens in any emergency, even if there's a car crash on the highway. You decide whether you're going to run in and help or whether you're going to see whether gas dripping for there to be an explosion, right? You
So-
either do it or you don't.
You know, I was also wondering just quickly whether or not a lot of these people were Trinidadians, you know, because as soon as something happened, you know, we be there. What's going on, boy? What's going on? You know?
So to compound the situation, Roger, a lot of people, like you say, rushed in, and firemen their brains are geared towards that, right? You know, and stuff, right? And the author mentioned that how, you know, they had poor communication. They had incoherent instructions. They weren't coordinated. So yes, they were heroes, but not all of them needed to die. In fact, the police had better communication. The police knew that the towers were coming down. The firemen did not. The communication was so poor, the firemen did not. The police and the fire, their two systems, didn't talk to each other. So this was all, you know, a disaster that on top of a disaster, right?
With Gotham City under attack, you know, people were actually looking for Superman and Batman and guys to come and defend the city.
Crazy.
So
right.
Dennison,
Bradford, they muted.
Austin, you were gonna say something?
yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm looking at the time and I don't want to cheat you out of anything. So I'm not. Do you think you have enough time to get through the others? Or?
Well, I'll try to go quickest. New Orleans has left. That's the
Okay.
only one, but
All right,
but
great.
that is a chunk. So
Okay.
I will try to be fast. All right. Let's go back.
Person, we will give him 10 or 12 minutes and then cut him off.
It's like the Academy Award. All right, New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, Monday, August 29, 2005, it occurred. It was a Category 3 hurricane at landfall. It had hit Florida before. It was a Category 5 at different stages in its life. Thank God it was only a Category 3 when it hit land in Louisiana and Mississippi. The levees failed around New Orleans, as you probably all know. 80% of New Orleans was flooded. 1,600 people perished, which was surprisingly a relatively small number, I think. The Superdome and the Convention Center were in high ground and survived, and that's where people went to you know, because they had nowhere else. Everything else was covered underwater. 20,000 people in the Superdome. Next door in the convention center, that also survived. And I think I read like 25,000 people in there, but I could be wrong. There were gangs of inner city men, but not gangs in the normal way. They were protecting the population. They were helping old people. They were helping babies. There was another armada of rescuers on boats that ferried tens of thousands to dry ground. Small groups, 25, 30, 50 people, operated as functioning social units, taking care of each other. Helicopters drop supplies, which is a good thing. The only thing is the army seemed to have dropped them from 40 to 50 feet. And a lot of it was damaged when it hit the ground. But then there was a whole bunch of good Samaritans that took hand carts and went out and brought water and food back to the crowd. They brought food for the police. There were no riots. There were no mass rapes. There were no black murdering gangs. This is pictures of New Orleans. You know, there's the houses on the top left hand. And you remember Gerald Boudou lived in New Orleans at that point in time. I presume his house was underwater. I don't know. There's the Superdome with its damaged roof. The waterproofing membrane was all peeled back. There's the inside of the Superdome and all of the thousands of people in there. Bottom right-hand corner is just an example of someone, they're trying to help a person, an older person who had been overcome by heat and dehydration. And you can see the anguish on the people's faces trying to help this poor woman. The bad with New Orleans, that waterproof membrane on the Superdome was damaged. There were holes in the roof. The power eventually went out. They had backup power, but it only powered the lights and the security lights and that sort of stuff. It was a dank, fetid, chaotic hobby. So that's and then the mayor was a guy by the name of Ray Nagin or Nagin, I'm not sure. And he said there were hundreds of gang members raping and murdering people. There was police chief Eddie Compass who told Oprah that the babies were being raped in the Superdome. Funny enough, these two guys, the mayor and the police chief, were both black men. Crazy, right? It was a mythic city of monsters invented by media and authorities, according to the author. The governor, Kathleen Blanco, deployed 40,000 troops, M16s locked and loaded, and she advised they will shoot to kill. The media, much blame was put onto the people who did not evacuate, but they didn't have the ability to evacuate. They didn't have transportation, gas money, nothing. They had no resources and nothing was provided for them to get out. Despite the Superdome suffering, the media focused on dry land and retail outlet plundering. So, you know, thousands of people suffering in the Superdome. Let's focus on the looters, right? Rumors of the police being shot, helicopters being sniped, media on the ground. The people on the ground knew what was going on and were reporting reality. However, the media from afar, they were going based on unsubstantiated rumors. There was rumors that there were 200 bodies at the Superdome. The mayor and the governor called off on August 31st, 2 days later, saying, okay, we're done with search and rescue. We're not looking for people to rescue people anymore. We're now going to be all about combating this looting. The troops that's what their focus was. People still dying, people still trapped. The bad, FEMA. After 9/11, they were part of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and they were focused on terrorism. So they weren't prepared for this natural disaster. They did their decision making. They turned away buses, truckloads of supplies, a hospital ship, water, the Amtrak train, which could have still got people in and out because New Orleans was not safe. George Bush, I remember this. I remember when George Bush said this. Brownie, you're doing a hell of a job. And he was talking to Michael Brown, who was the head of FEMA. And people were dying down there, and he was going, oh, you're doing a great job. Right? In one of the things they did, the bus contract was issued to a Bush supporter. The only problem is this guy didn't have any buses. So he had to go, he owned a trucking company. So now he had to go and subcontract to bus companies. That ended up being unbearable delay and unreasonable profit for him. Murderers. There were murderers among them. And those included the armed forces and the police shooting black men. and they threw their bodies into the river. Military escorts on boats. There was an account of 2 black men on a rooftop who they fired a weapon likely to draw attention, but the troops, the people on the boats imagined it was sniper fire, and basically they shot them and killed them, right? There was also white people talking about white savagery. Security firms were in there firing in the night, as they said, at black gangbangers. And they said, hey, we had to fire because we were returning fire. But the funny thing is, none of them were ever hit. And they could just hear the moaning and screaming in the darkness. The army came by, checked on these security firms and mercenaries, but never went to check on who was injured. A black man was shot in broad daylight by police because he was carrying scissors. And the reason he was carrying scissors, he was going to try to cut up some cardboard to make some shelter for his grandchildren. So this is some of the accounts that, I don't know that they are official, but this is what people have said to her. And to her, they were believable. The reality of New Orleans was that the elite panic was fueled by racism and the enormity of the storm. They were afraid of social disorder. They were afraid of the poor, minorities, immigrants. They were obsessed with looting and property crime. They were willing to resort to deadly force and actions taken on the basis of rumor. In the end, there were 1,600 dead, but the author suggests that a large portion of that, they died because of thirst, heat stroke, lack of medicine, or murder. And in the end, at the Superdome, where there were all sorts of horrendous rumors, there were only 6 people dead in the Superdome, not 200 like they had thought, that they imagined. It was a succession of disasters. The first disaster was the storm. The next was the failure of the levees, and this was unnatural. This is man-made. The failure and refusal of all levels of governments to provide evacuation and relief. There was calamity of the local, state, and federal government treating victims as criminals. They turned New Orleans into a prison city. They prevented people from evacuating as well, or they killed them, or they left them to die. And looting, the police did some looting too, as well, and there was evidence of that. And the other thing is that black people were looting, white people were gathering supplies, according to the media, right?
Always.
And here's some photos. You can see the troops patrolling on the left. You can see bottom left, you can see the horrendous fact of a body floating by in the river below this woman while she's trying to take care of her dog and herself, right? And then on the right-hand side, you can see a couple of accounts that I found on a couple of accounts on the internet where it talks about, the black guy with the garbage bag. A young man walks through chest-deep floodwater after looting a grocery store in New Orleans. And then a similar picture of 2 white people, 2 residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda. So they kind of, they were requisitioning stuff when the black guy was looting. Okay, I got through my part, Denison. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up for. All right. Sorry, you're on mute, Roger. I think you said something.
Okay, thank you all for your patience thus far. If there are comments, take 2-3 minutes and let's make them, and then we'll go into the Q&A. And you can participate in the Q&A because I have the questions queued up.
Okay.
Yeah, you did a great job. So I'm happy to read the rest of the book.
Sorry, Lawrence, go ahead.
Yeah, I said, thank you very much. You did a great job. Well done. And then you have saved me from reading the rest of the book.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Radford, you wanted to say something?
I was gonna go question and answer. I'll wait till question and answer.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. Let me do the Q&A then.
But before I do that, I just have an observation I wanted to make about the New Orleans situation. Following this thing as it was happening, I don't recognize it to be a Black experience. And the reason for that really was because there was a significant amount of time before the hurricane actually came over New Orleans. Okay, it came through Florida, as you said, at a category 5. So people were aware that this dangerous storm was happening. So most white folks who probably live in the suburbs and so on drove out. I remember seeing tremendous traffic on all the highways of people leaving the area. Okay. And the people who could not leave were the people who lived downtown and in, you know, in the inner city basically, right? Who generally took the bus to work, okay, and who did not have transportation of their own. You see? And no transportation was organized for these people to get them out of the area. Okay, and then there was a delayed response, really, well, not a response, but a delay between when the storm passed and when the flooding happened. Okay, so when the hurricane passed and I was gone, everybody felt that, oh, you know, we dodged the bullet. But then the levees broke, and then all of these people were trapped, right? In downtown, right? That picture you showed up on the body floating in the river was just one of many.
Mhm.
You know, and I could distinctly recall seeing a cop or a group of policemen, you know, passing dead bodies on the street, just covered over with black plastic garbage bags, basically. And they will be there for days, you know, unremoved.
Yeah.
You see, right? And that really speaks to how people are treated without any kind of dignity, really.
But Roger, they
in,
weren't
in,
looking.
in,
They weren't looking for the living. Far less were they looking to take care of the dead, right?
you know, but it's interesting as well that you mentioned what were some of the police responses, because I remember one of the most egregious cases came out of the fact of police standing at a distance, and it actually shot a guy who was autistic.
Yeah.
He was with his brother at the time, right? And I think, you know, several things came out of that one.
Yeah, the
right?
author mentioned that one. He was autistic, and that was one of the few cases where police were prosecuted.
Yeah, so those are just some of the comments that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
Anybody else with comments? All right, so what I'll do is that I'll show 3 or 4 questions at a time and then come back to this view so we could talk about it, right? Just so that you have an idea of the questions that we're going to start with is, what was your favorite part of the book? What was your least favorite? Did you race to the end, or was it more of a slow burn? So I will go to Roger and then to Vicky.
So I know I made some notes, but anyways, I think
Do you want me to show your notes? So how about Vicky and I go first, and then we'll show your notes? Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I could pull it up on my screen myself or something.
No. Well, I will show your notes so everybody could read it too, right?
Oh, okay. All right. So that's fine. Embarrass me, but that's okay.
What's your response? Favorite part, least favorite part? We could go fast.
Are you talking to me or you?
You.
So I think out of all these stories, the thread that I was seeing is when people are put in a situation of survival, it was really interesting what kicks in. And when they are we're closest to the disasters, the likelihood of the humanity being at its best, the greater angels within us surfaces, right? The closer you are, you see what is really happening. And then there was this leveling of hierarchies, if you will, for a short time. so that people were more willing to share or to give whatever they had, or it wasn't just giving what they felt like giving. There was the need became greater than the need of others became greater than their own needs. So I think throughout this, we see humanity, people rising to help others, not just take care of themselves. Even those that had very little to give still were able. And I mean, it's a thread in disasters of how people do step up and help.
Okay, and my quick answer is that my favorite part of the book was how she connected the trends across different kinds of disasters, different time periods, to show that there were consistencies in how people respond in times of crisis. I found the book very difficult to read. When I looked at the book reviews online, the book reviews were graphic. They were very much in praise of the author and this book. And I think that the people who wrote those book reviews were writing more in general, not specifically about this book. They were writing more about praising this author because she's on an ascendancy. And so the reviews were not in sync with my appreciation of the book. I thought the book was slow and boring.
Yeah, I thank you. I felt the same way about that book. I think it would make a good term or semester book, like a book that you could really like have some meaningful conversations and group work around. That to me seems like it could be a textbook for a class, I think. But to sit down and just pick it up for a light read, I'm like, it was painful.
Yeah.
At times.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to be painful because I care about the content and I want to be informed, but it was a painful read, I would say.
Yeah, it wasn't a light read. It was, that font and everything, spacing was tight, and it was like take forever to get through 3 or 4 pages, and there weren't a lot of breaks. So
How old is the author?
I don't know, but the book is a 2020 book, right? So it is very recent.
How old is the author?
Yeah.
Oh, she's a young woman. I mean, she may be in her 40s.
Yeah.
Okay. She's young.
The 40s, yeah.
I think one of the bigger question I would like to address is, if you look at all these situations, the people who exhibit community are usually the rank and file, the masses. And if you look at social movements all over the world, they always start from the bottom up. So then the question begs itself, what does wealth do to people that removes them from this mindset?
Okay, so Peter, let me try a quick answer. That will come up in the rest of the questions that we have in the Q&A, right? What we're saying is that when you're poor or you're middle class or you are an average citizen, you have much less to lose. And when disasters take place, those who don't see themselves as having a whole lot to lose band together for survival. Those who become afraid that people will break into their store or come into their homes to steal their food or go into their factories to steal stuff or into their banks and so on, they send the troops out, right? So they have political leverage already over the leaders and they influence them to try and protect their assets that they have.
Right.
So that wealth, I think, comes with a certain amount of fear of losing and possibly some greed, right?
And then listen, there's a factor there about distance from the disaster. The further you are from the disaster, the more you feel you have to protect. Because in the disasters, like San Francisco, rich people were all of a sudden leveled off in the same way as poor people. Money had no bearing. They had no possessions. They had no buildings, no nothing, no property. And those rich people were as altruistic as the poor people. Everybody was on a level playing field, right? And to add to what Vicky was saying, in those moments when everybody was on the level playing field, this is when many people reported that this euphoria or this experience of utopia, that was one of the, it's hard to say, but one of the happiest times in their life, where they found meaning, where they found, oneness with their fellow man. And many of them long for getting back to that, not for a disaster, but oh my God, how to capture that and put it and bottle it, right?
It's interesting, because if I were to widen this out to the global level, one could say that this is why the rest of the world suffered because of 9/11, because the US, being the rich person on the block, had more to lose than everybody else. So poor us in Trinidad, for example, had to be taking off our shoes and unbuckling our belts and other things, right? Not that any of that stuff was relevant to what was going on in, I don't know, in Cote d'Ivoire or Cape Verde or in Trinidad. You know what I'm saying?
The thing about it though is that even regular people, they value their stuff. They might not have as much as the wealthy people, but they value their stuff just as much as anybody else. So the thing that you said about the rich having more and so being more protective of this stuff, I think everybody's protective of this stuff.
Okay, Pete, what came across, right, is that if you're not into this fear syndrome, you're more willing to share. If you are caught up in the fear that you're going to lose or somehow be attacked, then you take defensive action. Now, to Roger's point, right, there were a lot of rich people who survived that San Francisco earthquake, who opened their homes, and rich and poor people got to come and live there at their house for weeks because they didn't have a place to go and live, right? So when you are in a disaster, I am saying humans have a continuum of reactions based on fear, and these are the two extremes. One where you become altruistic and help, and one where you become the problem.
What I would like to see is if there's any data on these wealthy people who open their homes, if they were first generation rich people, or if they were the children of rich people and they grow up in privilege. That would be a nice thing to analyze.
Yeah, and one of the questions that we have coming up soon is, who do we think most needs to read this book? So you'll find out in a little while.
Also, in addition to what Peter just said, right? I mean, remember with 9/11, what happened in Newfoundland, right?
Yeah.
The general population has opened their homes to thousands of stranded Americans.
Right.
And it was rich and poor, black and white, native, everyone alike opened their homes to these stranded people who were flying to the States and were grounded.
It's interesting that you should say that, Lauren, because another lesson that was learned, and I was hoping that Roger would have touched on the Halifax thing, but that when that explosion happened, okay, one of the takeaways that the people in the US noted was the creation of a bomb that will cause tremendous damage, and that was the birth of the atomic bomb, actually.
Okay, so Roger Pisa, I know you're asking for Roger Ahmed to do more. I was trying to get him to do less. Right? If you want more, you have to.
No, but just an observation.
Yes. Okay. Let me hit a few more of these questions. Yes, Vicky.
Well, it just occurred to me that proximity to this that I mentioned earlier, and then it was brought up again, like the closer you are, the amount of fear that you might have versus being at a distance. And it seemed like the fear was greatest for those at a distance. And I would imagine for those that felt like they had the most to lose by that. So, rather than being empathetic at a distance and saying, wow, that could, by the grace of God, go I, it'd be like, you got to stop those people, because if they, if they run rampant and they can rape and pillage and whatever the hell they're doing, then, everything's out of control. And I think it comes down to money and power, right? Those that feel like both their power and status in society and money are at risk are more likely to interpret things, especially at a distance, as being more negative if it threatens their position on those fronts. And I think that's a lot of what we see. Like, you're not looking at it objectively from a distance. You're looking at it from your perspective and where you sit in the scheme of things. Are you sitting in the wealthy? Are you sitting in a working class? And I think then and we see this play over and over again. I've seen it with the more recent protests in Portland, sending in troops because the interpretation of the violence that was here that was not here. And it's easier then to say, if I interpret this is creating risk to me and people like me, then we have to send the military, and we have to do whatever it takes to put these people down. And it's sad, but that's, when I think about proximity, I think that's the point. If anything, it stuck most with me, is just how perspective changes based on where you're coming from, physically, emotionally, socioeconomically, spiritually, all those things colors the way we see the world.
So are we naturally an altruistic organism or not?
And so what this author would argue is that we are.
Yeah.
And if we weren't in this system of things, like you were saying,
right,
did refer to Malthus and Hobbes and Darwin,
right?
Right.
That can be looked at, right? We can look at societies, more Scandinavian or societies that have a little bit more leveling. They don't have maybe quite the extremes of wealth. Societies where they take care of their homeless and they make sure people have medical, and that they pay for education. It would be interesting to see how that looks then. Are people more altruistic when they don't worry about those things being taken from them?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
You're talking about socialism and capitalism.
Yeah, because I was wondering if it's a conservative versus a progressive kind of mentality.
Right, but
Okay, I have. Am I on?
Yes.
You're
on.
on.
Okay, I have a comment and a question. Okay, and to answer Georgia's question, she's 60 years old. She was born in 1961. Okay, my
Oh boy.
Well, she looks so young. That's awesome. It gives me hope. Yay.
Okay. Secondly, commenting on 9/11 and the media and Giuliani and all those, and the firefighters. I remember reading an article years ago before Black Lives Matters about how the Black firefighters were treated in the media after 9/11. Essentially ignored. And all the comments by the media went towards the white firefighters. When Giuliani appeared on Saturday Night Live, there was not one Black firefighter there with him. Okay, that's my comment. Secondly, we're talking about natural disasters. The West Indies has natural disasters every goddamn year. Okay, we all see the good. For example, with the volcano eruption in St. Vincent, everybody from the came together. We don't hear about the bad. Does anybody could tell me what bad occurs in our situation as opposed to the stuff that occurring natural disasters in the States?
Well, I would think that the bad happens like with the immediate aftermath of the disaster, whether it's a hurricane and people's houses are blown away or whatever. But as you quite rightly say, and this is somewhat different to what pertains in the United States, is that when there is a disaster in one territory, the whole of the Caribbean, or at least the whole of the English-speaking Caribbean, comes and, people send troops, people send doctors, people send, material and equipment and so on. I mean, in 2018, Dominica was pretty much destroyed, right? Now Dominica is a normal, flourishing place, right? I mean, Puerto Rico was also destroyed in 2018, and they are still suffering the effects of that disaster, And so one wonders why that is, right?
I can tell you.
Yeah.
I could tell you too.
Well, tell us.
Another time.
Okay.
The other thing that came through to me was the importance of leadership. In every example Roger discussed, in terms of quote unquote the bad, poor leadership, political leadership, that is, seemed to be commonplace. I mean,
right.
Did the author speak to that specifically?
She didn't call it out. Maybe at the end, towards the end, she might have, but but I was tired by the time I reached there. So she, the leadership is people who are there because of the preferences of the elite. So the leadership reflects the elite, right? So the elite feels the fear, feels and believes, and the elite is at a distance, and the elite includes the authorities, right? And their decisions are not core for the benefit of the people. There is some of that, but there's also them looking out for them and their buddies, right? Bush and his people giving the contract to the trucking guys for buses, right? So we see that repeated over and over, right?
Right.
Well, you could consider that altruism in a closed environment.
Yeah, so
being altruistic, but only to their friends.
Yeah.
That is called the opposite of altruism, right?
Yeah, I think so.
One of the unfortunate things, also, there's one of the unfortunate things about like the situation with looters being shot and so on, is that communication from the authorities to the general population probably was non-existent.
Right.
So the armed forces in uniform knew that they were to shoot on sight. But the poor person who is rummaging, trying to find something to eat or salvage a mattress or something, is unaware that the uniformed people were given instructions to shoot to kill.
Yes.
So maybe even in sight of the uniformed officers, they were doing their stuff,
But as you say that, in 1990, Vicky, we had
go with the dust again.
we had a coup d'etat in Trinidad, or an attempted coup d'etat in Trinidad, and there was a lot of pillaging and looting and other things. Okay, I don't consider myself to be, a particularly wealthy guy. I'm just a normal, ordinary guy.
All that money I suck away in Diego Martin. Stop lying now, Roger. Come on.
So that came only after you gave me the loan. But anyways, I came out onto my porch and I saw, I was overlooked. I lived on the hillside, and I saw people down the street looting, supermarket and everything. And then it struck me, it never once crossed my mind to go down and loot from anybody. And I was speaking to Malcolm, our brother, and he told me the same thing, that as people were looting around him, that thought never entered his consciousness, not once.
But if you had a constant worry about food in your life,
I don't think
you think you might have thought differently?
Okay.
I think it's a mindset. I'll tell you something. When I saw Abu Bakr on the news, the first thing I did was pick up the phone and make a call to the Cadet Force head office. And I say, okay, where you want me deployed, right? You know, because I was ready to volunteer. And I was given instructions, X, Y, Z, what to do, and so on and so on. And I was up at the heliport there in tutus, you know?
Yeah.
But this is the thing, people from the same kind of social background, the same kind of ease of life, even though you might look at certain difficulties in your life, can't really relate to people who grew up in Beetham, where every day is a struggle to eat. And now suddenly they have an opportunity to get free food and free stuff.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Let us go back to where Vicky was and connect it to this, right? If you're close to the action and you're right there on site and you're seeing what's going on, you are in a reality and you can react to that reality. If you're far away and you're sending instructions to create law and order, you behave differently because you really don't know what the ass is going on there, right? No. Then we go back to 1990, the 27th of July. No sane thinking person would leave home and go downtown to loot. Those who were looting were instructed to loot beforehand. That was to be part of a distraction, right? Which person from Faizabad or San Fernando or something went to town to loot, right? That was organized. That was part of the plan for that looting to happen, to create some chaos for the coup to have a better chance of success. That was orchestrated.
That was, sorry, PK, go ahead.
Yeah.
Right.
Back to the book, all right?
Thank you.
The theme, the author, she's using all of these disasters as a metaphor to look at the human condition. And we see the best in human behavior when people share a burden and they help each other. And then you have other people who then feel threatened or see an opportunity who would then bring out the bad in humanity. If we accept that, I'm just going to light a match on this. How do you explain 6th of January, 2021, where you have the same body in the House of Congress being subjected to the same threat? You think they would rise to the occasion and help each other, which they did at the time to get out of harm's way, and then they become elites or non-elites who have fear or feel threatened, and now you see the bad coming out. I'm just putting a match by the fire. My 2 cents.
But PK, isn't that a good example? In the moment of the disaster, they're all scared together, looking out for each other, right? Is that your point? But then you remove them from the disaster a couple of hours later, or a day later, or whatever, and all of a sudden, oh, how can I play this to my benefit? Right. So now I'm denouncing that this was even an insurrection. This was just people, tourists coming to see. Right.
I think Roger, where this whole thing ties in, where this whole thing ties into the earlier discussion is people's reality. Okay, so the reality of those people who are not there when the disaster happens is different to the reality of the people who are there in the middle of everything. You see what I'm saying? And in the Caribbean are small islands, regardless of whether you're rich or poor, everybody is there experiencing, 150, 200 mile an hour winds. You see? That brings me to January 6th, which is this new phenomena of creating different realities for people. You see, so those people who stormed, the US Capitol building had a totally different reality because, they were fed stuff that made them, act in a certain way.
No, but Roger, that's a separate point. The people who stormed the building, the metaphor for that is a hurricane. The members of Congress are the victims who are living on the ground when the hurricane hit.
Right.
But then you have people who were on the ground when the hurricane hit, after the storm has passed, who are behaving differently, where they are now the ones seeing an opportunity here to probably
Land grab.
Yeah.
Land
That-
grab.
that- right.
They saw what they were going to lose. Like
Yeah.
it's like somebody slapped them all in the face and said, "Get with the program." Because if you side with them that this was an insurrection, then you're going to lose your power, and we can't lose power. So let's grab. That's what I see. It's like their moment of solidarity was brief, because the reality is if they stayed in that place, they would have to do something about it. And they were not prepared to lose power, status, reelection, money. So they
Ambition is a
couldn't stay in that moment. They had to, yeah.
Well, they could have if they had some integrity and if they really cared
Oh,
about the people they're
please.
supposed to represent.
Yeah.
But
If they
they
had
don't.
integrity, then most of them probably wouldn't be there, but that's a whole nother story. So anyway,
The problem is that they're on record, so they cannot go back now and say.
But they did. They went back. I mean, McCarthy said something. The next day he said Trump
Yeah.
was to blame. And then after
Yeah,
he
well,
pulled it
yeah.
back. So the hypocrisy
really
is
keep-
amazing.
it's alternative realities.
Okay,
Yeah.
so guys, it is 10 o'clock Eastern.
Wow.
Yeah, but before we leave, I haven't heard from Peter Holder, man. What's up?
Yeah,
with
well,
that?
okay, let me just let Mother have his 2 cents. I will put in my 1 cent, and then who want to stay on could stay on. So Mother,
Oh, no, sorry, Dennis. I was only going to suggest that we want to get back to the Q&A, or you know, I don't know if people are prepared to spend some more time, or if they want to wrap things up. You know.
well,
I want to hear from Peter Holder.
just show by a vote of hands if you want to get back to the Q&A or if you want us to wrap up now.
I want to hear from Peter Holder.
I just want to say that my mute button has been working good all night long.
It's been working. We're working.
Awesome. Take care, Austin.
Okay,
All right, see you,
Austin.
Austin.
Take care.
See you, Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
It's
gentlemen, it was very interesting. It
well,
was
we
really
have more
nice
than
to meet you,
gentlemen
Vicky.
here, Peter.
Lady.
Huh?
We have more than gentlemen here.
That's all right.
You see, I addressed Vicky.
See, that's so great. I
Personally.
must have fit in nicely because you forgot that I was the only woman in the group. So I consider that a compliment.
Yeah. No, I didn't. I was going to address you specifically, you know.
Oh, no.
Ah.
I should probably dread that, I think. I have a feeling I know who you are in this group.
Well, I don't know what that means, but scares me a little bit. Anyway, yeah, so I gotta go. It was a really interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't know what's the intention. What we have planned for next week.
Next week, Govind is presenting.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was
All right.
very
so,
nice to meet you before you sign off, and everyone else too. And Dennison, thank you for inviting me. It was really a pleasure. It was one of the nicest group discussions I've had in a really long time. So,
Okay, so let me make an announcement, right?
okay.
The person who recommended this book was me.
Mhm.
And I recommended this book based on book reviews that were available on
Right.
Amazon and Goodreads and so on.
Mhm.
After encountering the density of this book, with Gurahu and Mother, I've decided that we're not going to let anybody recommend books that they haven't actually read.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, so for the next round of nominations, we want you to nominate a book that you've read, and we'll have the next book club event like this about 2 months from now. So I'll put that into the schedule.
So does Enid Blyton count still?
To get people to vote for your email, we'll go with that, right? So,
Yes, Lawrence, we know that will shape your character bigly.
so, Mother, you want one nomination and a reason why we should read the book?
Yeah, yeah. And that reason can be like you can take an excerpt from the book repeat that or whatever, or put it in your own words and stuff, right? So that's it. And Peter Can, before you leave, one of the questions was, who would you most like to read this book, or who you think? And you were the man I thought of, because I thought it would give validation to some of your thoughts on those damn Europeans.
Oh my God. You see, I was hesitant. I didn't want to bring it up. So
yeah.
I don't know what to say. That was my immediate thought when I read some of it, but a lot of it has to do, I think, with the political systems in place and the mindset they generate, you know, and the mindset you have in a system that's dominated by capitalism, which is just basically competition, conflict, and we know where that comes from. And then you have
Peter.
Yeah.
And the author said exactly that. So that would resonate. Her ideas resonated with yours. Now, Roger, do you have a hard copy or a Kindle version?
I have a hard copy.
All right, Peter, swing across by Roger one of these days and borrow a book now, man.
Yeah, all right, I'm gonna do that.
You got vaccinated yet? I mean, you know,
I got the first one.
Okay, good. So you'll have to wait on the second one to get
$5 a week. Okay.
I have it on Audible, but I'm not sure how to share it.
Yeah,
right, people.
I don't think that I would recommend anybody get the Kindle version and try to scroll through and read it.
Oh, no.
It was too long, and
yeah, the hardback was
to read like that.
Paperback was hard enough.
Yeah. Okay. So, Govind, I think that this book will also resonate with next week's talk. So, Peter, be sure that you're there, because Govind's talk dovetails well with some of the ideas that you've shared in the past. And so,
what is Govind talking about again, if I may ask?
The Malthusian catastrophe.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Yes.
So what I wanted to do in my last minute for you is give you
Michael Henry.
A couple of quotes from the book, right? One is that humans need meaning and purpose in order to survive in times of crisis. The other is by striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, people find meaning and grow. And my third quote is this, right? In times of disaster or crisis, conflicts between people because of economics and ideologies become relatively insignificant.
Yes.
So those are three quotes that I thought.
So if you want to have a good relationship with someone you have issues with, keep creating crises.
Okay.
Many marriages survive that way.
Govind had made an interesting comment about disaster management.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, being an emerging area.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite interesting, because when you don't handle disasters or risk management properly, it turns into crisis very quickly.
Right.
Crisis management.
And disaster frequency is going to go up because of climate change and because of growing population.
Right.
So there is not opportunity, but that is something that's we're going to have to deal with.
Right. I agree.
One of the things the book mentioned also was how our environment, our socioeconomic environment, pushes us back into our living rooms and in front of our TV screens or computers and that sort of stuff, and isolates us,
right?
So that we don't know our neighbor 2 doors down or 3 doors down. So this system that we're in is pushing us away from this altruistic, get to know your neighbor, be part of your community. And I think that is valid, because I think I remember reading one of the things where somebody was out after 9/11 and they were doing so much to help people, help rescue people and all. And then they went back into their room and they put on the news. And while they were helping people, it was all very calm. They were doing things very calmly. Nobody was really hysterical. But then she goes into a living room in an apartment and she puts on the TV, and it's hysteria, mass hysteria on the media. And it's just a completely different vibe.
Right.
She needed to shut it off and go back outside.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point on, getting back the other. I think that's how I would frame that, fear of other. So where we isolate in our homes, you might watch Fox News, or news that sort of promotes that. They showed the worst often of humanity. And so if you aren't connected to your community, these people become others. We can label them, we can categorize them, right? But if we're out of our houses and out into the community, then they're us. They're not others. They're our neighbors. They look like us. They go to jobs. So I think this proximity thing again comes into play. The further you are from it, they're less likely to be the other in your life. They're likely to be others and not be like you or perceived to be the other, something to be feared. I don't know, just a thought.
I agree.
Interestingly, I recall 9/11 vividly.
Yeah.
It was the first time that the Project Management Institute had a meeting in Trinidad. And I was part of the project management people there. So we had this conference in the Hilton Hotel, And the meeting started, the people were giving presentations and stuff. And there were a number of American people there, And then first plane crashed into the tower and Interestingly, all the Trinidadian people, right, gathered around to see what was going on and so on various television, things in the center. But all the American people, just carrying on very professionally, giving the presentations and And I'm there telling myself, but hold on, this thing is happening in New York, right? Some of these people from New York. And it's nothing. The people, Trinidadians are in a frenzy, yes, especially when the tower came down. I still recall seeing a guy jump from the top of that building on television whilst I was there. You see? And it was like normal, for the invited guests.
Roger, when I was researching for images to attach to this presentation, naturally I came across 911 images that some of them really upset me, where people are, at the windows and they're about to jump, and people head first down and so. However, it was not relevant to the book's theme. And I didn't think it was necessary to put it on there to upset people further, right? But yeah, it struck me when I was looking back at it. It got to me that, oh my God, this was horrible beyond words, right?
But interestingly, horrible things happen to a lot of people all over the world. Every single day, and
yes,
I thought it was interesting that the author focused on North America specifically.
Well, she did have Mexico in there as well.
Yeah, North America.
Yeah, and it's all what people she could talk to and get garner information. There was obviously the big tsunami of what year was it?
There was in the Philippines.
Yeah, 250,000 people dead, but I don't think she had the same connections or whatever to get that information. Right?
Interesting. Down in Phuket, that was the name of the place down in the Philippines.
Phuket.
All right, Dennis, good night.
I am signing off. So good
night. I am too.
Vicky, thanks for joining.
Thank you all.
We should wrap it up. Good
night, Vicky.
Yes, invite me back sometime, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we are here on Wednesdays. So,
after you take a vote, then if I pass, invite me back.
Well, we might bring you back and expel a few others.
Oh, that is terrible. It has to be somebody not on this call right now, I assume.
No, we're comfortable getting rid of them.
Yeah. Vicky, knowing him, he might invite you and tell you bring 2 friends,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So say hi to Wendy and take care, everyone. Okay. Bye now.
All right, guys, have a good evening.
Good
night.
Rest of evening.
Take care.
Good night.
All right. Well, I'm heading out
Take
too.
care.
All right, good
So,
night.
good night, guys.
Okay.
Until
Take
next
care.
time.
Bye.
Hey, Roger.
All right.
All right.
Take
I'm
care.
signing off, everyone. Later.
Yeah.